This is Road Tripping in America, a podcast about life on the road. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Paul.
We're exploring the U.S. in a pickup truck with a camper. We named our setup the Bobs. We're in search of off-the-beaten-path adventures and new experiences. Join us as we share our stories from the road, from a very noisy campsite in Ohio. Today, what happens when you get pulled over in the middle of the night by what feels like the entire police force of Missoula, Montana? It's a driver's ed segment featuring three dads from upstate New York who, for a few hours in 1993, found themselves in the kind of situation they never expected to be in when they had left home for a Northern Rockies backpacking trip 40-ish hours earlier.
That's when it really got scary.
I was sitting in the cop car when Durf popped his head up, and I really thought they were going to shoot him.
Yeah, we were probably the most wanted guys in Montana that night.
This is Series 4, Episode 7, Montana's Most Wanted. Driver's Ed, where we are schooled by the road, learning as we go. Today, we're talking to three people I've known my whole life. My dad and his college friends Durf and Tom. These guys were my first real-life adventure heroes. I loved adventure stories growing up, so I had plenty of fictional inspirations. Karana from Island of the Blue Dolphins, Jim from Treasure Island, the hobbits from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the kids from Goonies. But I didn't really know anyone else in real life who did anything that could be considered adventurous in the outdoor sense. Anyone who knows my dad knows that he is seemingly impervious to pain and cold. He considers bushwhacking up a mountain or through a dense forest a quick, fun hike. His snowshoe excursions are notorious. His trail mileage estimates are always short of reality. Durf and Tom were always down for the same stuff, as you'll hear. I could never, and will never be able to, go as hard as and intense as these guys can still go in their 70s. But these three were an inspiration for me to fearlessly go do wild things, once I learned how to do them my own, less intense way. I was really excited to catch up with them on this June day.
Well, it's really good to see you all.
I'm Dad, aka Bob McNamara. I'm a self-employed graphic artist or environmental interpreter.
Just a heads up that Durf and Tom both call my dad Mac, not Bob or Dad, obviously. Mac is short for McNamara.
Durf, a.k.a. Fred Boham, semi-retired land surveyor.
Durf, of course, is Fred spelled backwards.
I'm Tom Backus, no nickname. I'm a retired forester working with DEC. Right now, I haven't been doing anything of worth for the last 15 years.
So how did you all first meet?
Well, we met in Syracuse at ESF.
ESF is the College of Environmental Science and Forestry in Syracuse, New York. This was the late 1960s, which means they've been friends for more than 50 years. This conversation isn't just about one of the scariest things that happened to these three. It's also about friendship and inside jokes that last decades. And it's about memory. How our minds highlight some events while glossing over others. How memory is often a collective, shared experience.
We were all roommates at the Roosevelt, an apartment building that was way out of the beaten path. It was like a mile and 700 feet elevation difference from our place to the campus. We had 4 to 5 people in these flats that used to be apartments. You know, they had what was probably a living room and a kitchen and 2 bedrooms, but the living room became 2 bedrooms. And the kitchen was a bedroom, which Durf stayed in. Right, Durf?
That's right. I had a electric frying pan and a little tiny refrigerator there, one of them square refrigerators, and a coffee pot that I used to make potatoes in. I boiled my spaghetti and my potatoes in a coffee pot. And I had an electric frying pan. Yeah. But that's all as far as the kitchen. It had a bunk in it, a desk, kind of a table that I could use for cooking on.
Durf and I were in the same room, but Tom was not. He was in the same building, but in a different room with different roommates.
I didn't show up until 2 years later. I went 2 years at Paul Smith College, and then I transferred into Syracuse. At that point, we had a mutual friend, Jeff Gutschall, who was kind of a bridge between the two apartments, and we got to know each other and started going on trips together, hanging out.
I think backpacking is what got us going. We all backpacked together, and then we had something in common, and we tried to get up in the hills as much as we could after that.
The hills, the Adirondack Mountains, are 3 to 4 hours by car from Syracuse, New York. Adirondack Park was created in 1892, and it's the largest publicly protected area in the contiguous United States, covering over 6 million acres.
How did you get up there in those days? Did anybody have a car or did you hitchhike?
Mac had I guess you call it a car, had wheels on it, and it moved.
It was the GT6.
Oh, nice.
A Triumph GT6, an English sports car that seats 2 comfortably and 2 others much less comfortably. It would have been fairly new at that point. GT6s were made from 1966 to 1973.
Yeah, I actually drove that up to the Adirondacks in January one time and met Durf up there, and we hiked up Mount Marcy.
Mount Marcy, at 5,343 feet, or 1,629 meters in elevation, is the highest point in New York State.
It was probably, I think, the second trip that we ever did. The first one was Algonquin, right? And Jeff Gutschall got us to go on that, I think.
Algonquin, that's the second highest point in New York State.
Yeah, it was, but they're all in winter.
Yeah, it was January.
Yeah.
And Tom, you were on that trip.
Yeah, that was the first trip I did with you guys.
Mine too, yep.
Middle of winter.
Me too. Yeah, that was the first trip. And it was crazy. That was the one where we hiked with full packs right up over the top of Algonquin and down the backside and camped at Lake Colden. Had no idea what we were doing.
Right. And blue jeans, rubber boots, remember?
Oh,
Pack boots.
Yeah.
I bet you had some cold feet.
Yeah. Durf's sleeping bag, the zipper broke, so he couldn't close his sleeping bag.
That's right.
Tom fell into a spruce cave on the backside of Algonquin. Took him about an hour to get out. And we waited for a while for him, but then we just said, nah, we're going.
Really?
I remember your pack, Mac, was so small you had to carry your sleeping bag. You remember?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in your hand. You had to carry your sleeping bag in your hand.
Yeah. Bound up with baling twine.
That's right.
I remember getting to the top of the peak on that, and we went up one side and we got up there and there was no sign of the trail going down the steep, what was that, east side of the, and I was all in favor of going back down the way we came up.
The sensible one.
Mac and Durf decided they knew where they were going and they proceeded down through, I don't know how they found the trail, but it was not obvious to me, but I followed them.
We pushed back a bit, I think. But yeah, down. Cold though.
We got down to Lake Colden and the sun was just set. The sun had set and it was just starting to get dark and we didn't have any stoves or anything. So
Yeah.
we were dependent on having a fire. So we had to scrounge up some firewood and I guess we probably ate that night, didn't we? We got a fire going. We ate something, I think. I don't know.
So, Tom, how did you get out of the spruce cave?
A spruce cave is formed when a dense stand of small spruce trees gets completely covered with snow. The small trees bend down under the weight of the snow, and large open pockets are created underneath. It actually can be a pretty dangerous situation, like falling into a crevasse in a glacier, though nowhere near as deep. But you can get trapped in a spruce cave and have a really hard time finding your way out.
Well, they didn't totally abandon me. I don't know if I could have gotten out of there by myself or not.
He's so tall, he can pop out of that kind of stuff, you know. It's,
That sounds scary. That's a hazard of winter bushwhacking that I never thought of before.
Yeah.
So their mutual appreciation of Sufferfests, aka backpacking, started in college, but it didn't end there.
We all hung out together for a couple of years there at ESF. And then finally Jeff left and Durf left and Tom left. I was there all by myself for a year, but we got to be good friends there. And then when Gutchell moved out west, we always made a point to stop in and see him whenever we were traveling.
yeah, we try to go out one year and then he'd come back here the next. And then we go out there and he'd come back here. We were pretty steady for a few years. And then we had families and kids and bills. Well, I had bills. I don't know about the other two guys, but I had to work.
We did it for quite a few years. And boy, we saw some amazing places that we could never get to again, right?
I mean, what would you typically do on those trips? Because it seemed to me like you just pick the hardest goal possible and then do it.
Yeah, we would do too much. Nothing is a better example of that than when we like drove like straight for 40 hours or whatever it takes to get to Yellowstone. And then we finally got there in the morning. So we got a permit for the backcountry and we loaded up our packs way too heavy and we hiked way too far
Yeah.
in way too little time and set up camp on this remote lake somewhere. I can't remember where, but it was great.
The reason our packs were way too heavy was Mac always brought about 20 pounds worth of camera lenses
That's right.
and
And
camera
a tripod.
equipment with-
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
and distributed it up between Durf and I.
Really? That's nice friends.
Yeah, we were his mules.
By Sherpas.
Who had to carry that giant 500 millimeter lens?
Exactly.
I would take that.
Really.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. But yeah, I would take that. And I remember one time in particular in Algonquin Park, Durf got stuck with it, hiking from like one lake to another, looking for moose. And he didn't like that too well. I remember coming back from that trip in Yellowstone and we were thinking, oh man, that was really bad. We got up to Gutchell's and we were going to go on another trip. And so we just were really careful. We cut everything down. We whittled all the stuff down and distributed it all perfectly until we only had 35-pound packs. And that was ideal. So the next trip was much better. It was up in northern Idaho somewhere.
Yeah, we got rid of all that dumb stuff like water.
When you planned your trips, was the ultimate goal to find wildlife, or was it more about hiking, or what?
It was both. You know, I was trying to find wildlife, but just get to the top of some peak somewhere too is definitely a goal. Just get as far as we could back into the wilderness.
I just wanted to get someplace I'd never been before. Had to see what's over the next hill around the next corner of the trail. But your dad was really into the wildlife. I mean, he loved a lot of camera gear.
I sense a little bitterness still about this.
I don't remember making them carry much of it though. I thought I carried most of my own junk most of the time.
What was your favorite place you ever went?
I'd say Banff
Boy, that's tough. Yeah.
or Jasper. Jasper is great.
Oh, I'd say Kokanee Glacier.
Oh, what was it? Provincial park too.
Don't forget Valhalla.
Yeah,
Valhalla.
that's it. Valhalla. Yeah, I gotta agree with Tom. Valhalla.
Valhalla and Kokanee. I mean, there's
It's in British Columbia, right?
yeah, that's both. That's right up there. Yeah, Valhalla or Kokanee, either one of those. I think Valhalla.
Yeah, I go Valhalla too.
In other words, we like Canada better than the good old USA.
Yeah, well, those British Columbia provincial parks were just amazing. But Valhalla was great. That Valhalla was where Lucifer was, that Lucifer Peak, and that
Yeah,
really
right.
rugged wild area. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'd say that was my favorite.
Yeah, and Huckleberries.
How about least favorite?
Allen Mountain.
Yeah, Alan in the Adirondacks. And we took us 2 or 3 trips up that, and the snow was deep every time. It was cold. By the time we finally get up there, we had a break trail every step. By the time we get up there, all it was just trees.
Yeah, and we were standing, it was in January probably, and we were standing on top of Allen Mountain. And we were looking way back down the valley to where our campsite was, which was probably 4 miles away. And it was dark already. I mean, the moon was out, was coming out, and it was cold, like way below zero. And so, yeah, that was a
Yeah.
rough slog back to camp that night. I'll be right back. I gotta take a quick break. I'll be right back.
I knew that was going to happen.
Let's take a break too. When we come back, we're headed to Montana and a certain McDonald's. And we're back. Let's go back to summer 1993. 3 college friends in their early 40s are driving west from northern New York to Glacier National Park in Montana in a gray Ford Econoline van.
Where were you?
We were in Missoula, I mean, to start, and it was after we'd driven all the way across the country. We drive, each guy would drive 4 hours because it took 4 hours to burn off a tank of gas. And so we'd stop for gas and then we'd rotate. Somebody'd sleep in the back and a new person would drive. And so, there we were, finally arrived in Missoula. It was around midnight. It was Tom's turn to drive. I had been driving and Dirk was sleeping in the back.
I sleep really good when we're moving. I mean, I sleep real good in the car. And then you guys stopped. So I woke up and I looked out the window and I saw you walking around the parking lot doing jumping jacks and stretching. And I looked inside the restaurant. I didn't even know what the restaurant was. And I saw Tom look like he was lost. He was walking around there looking around the building and inside the building. And then he came out. I went back to sleep. And then a while later, he got pulled over. And I heard this big loudspeaker from a cop car said, "Hey, you driver, throw the keys out of that car. Keep your hands where you can see them, but we can see them." And then Tom got out. I think didn't he put his coat over his head or something? They had him lay down. Then he started yelling at you in the passenger seat, passenger, hands where we could see him. And then you got out, and I said, "Oh, poop. They're gonna want me to get out too." So I sat up, and when I sat up, I heard the loudspeaker yelling, "There's another one in the back, there's another one in the back." And then they yelled, "You in the back, put your hands up where we can see him." Well, I didn't have my boots on. So I bent over, and they went nuts when I bent over. They were screaming, but I slid them on, and they had me get out of the car, same as you guys, turn around. And they handcuffed me. And then when I turned around and looked back, there's like 4 cop cars, 4 or 5, with their lights on, flashing lights and the headlights. And they all had these pistols pointed at me. One guy had a long gun pointed at me. And they were all young cops. They were psyched. And I think if I'd put my hand down an itch or something, they probably would have thought I was going for something. And I would have been. But when they put me in a car, and a guy came along. I think he might have been a detective. He was older and he was plain clothes. And he started asking me all these questions. He said, "Ask me where we're going." I told him we're going to Missoula. He said, "Ask me again." I told him we're going to Missoula, then we're going to go north to Glacier. And he asked me like 3 or 4 times. Then he got out of the car and left me. Then he came back and asked me again. And I told him again. See, I had been sleeping. I didn't know we had already gone through Missoula. So that's made him suspicious, right?
Uh-huh.
But all I can remember is the handcuff on my left wrist was so tight. And I asked him to loosen it up. And he said, "No, I can't do that." Couldn't trust me, But then I'm sitting there and I watch, and they just gutted the truck. They took everything out, all our gear. And they're going through it, feeling through the sleeping bags and all that stuff. I guess they were looking for a pistol, right?
Or money.
Well, what did you think was happening at first? Like, Tom, did you just think, oh, they thought you were speeding or something, or I must have ran a stop sign?
I pretty well knew that they weren't considering us for speeding because I noticed one car tailing me a long ways back, and he kept the same distance for a mile or more until one or two more cars caught up to him, and then they both accelerated quickly, caught up to us, and I knew that, they don't do that for a speeding infraction.
Mhm.
So I had no idea really what was going on. And things happened so quickly that you didn't really have time to think about what was going on, other than we were in trouble.
I can remember you, when you came out of the McDonald's there, you were puzzled because they didn't charge you for the coffee.
Yeah, I walked into McDonald's and there was somebody in there, and I was going to wait for him to go ahead. And then he said, well, I could go ahead. So, but I was kind of standing back looking at the display because they had a sign up saying 5-cent cup of coffee. Back then, even then, it was cheap, awfully cheap. I couldn't believe it was 5 cents. I got up there and I was fishing around, I guess, in my pocket for loose change, and they said, it's free. So I got my 5-cent cup of coffee for free.
So the guy was nervous, huh?
Yeah, he was acting strange. I didn't really think too much of it at the time. People out at 2 a.m. in the morning or whatever it was, they're kind of strange to begin with, including those people that are pulling in a van at that time.
In case you missed it, that guy standing in the McDonald's who let Tom go ahead and order his coffee ahead of him, that guy must have been the robber. Tom walked into an armed robbery in progress and didn't even realize it. We kind of gloss over this, the first near miss of this whole experience. Being groggy from driving for the past 40 plus hours, I'm sure had a lot to do with it.
I remember when the cop said, throw your keys out the window, you said, what?
Well, what really confused, I've always had a hearing problem, but what really confused me was after I threw the keys out, then he said, show your hands and get out of the car. Well, how do you do that? How do you reach down and get the handle? Well, both hands are showing out the window. It took me a few seconds to figure that out. They didn't shoot me when I opened the door anyway. That was good.
So what did they do to you when they took you back to your separate car?
Well, they put us each in separate cars.
The audio gets really scratchy here, so I'll share the rest of Tom's answer. Tom said that they put them in the separate cars for interrogation to make sure we didn't collude on our tail. They probably asked what we were doing and if we had been at McDonald's. I think they asked where we were from and if we were married and our contact information. I was thinking that they would be calling our wives at that point to corroborate our stories, but they never called our wives.
I guess they believed us after a while.
When they took me back into the car, I was telling him that we're just on a backpacking trip. What's going on? They asked if any of us had a leather jacket because apparently the robbers had a leather jacket or something. I said, no, we don't have any leather jacket. That's one of the things they were looking for when they were swarming over the vehicle.
Somebody must have, because Tom looked kind of suspicious and you were up walking around that parking lot and Tom was kind of confused inside. And they saw a gray Ford van with New York plates. Yeah, we were probably the most wanted guys in Montana that night.
When did they start kind of realizing that you weren't the perps? Or when did you start figuring out what was going on?
Well, we didn't know for a long time until they let us out of the vehicles and uncuffed us.
Right. Yeah.
Then they finally said what had happened and they apologized, to us. But here they didn't even put all of our stuff back, of course. They just tore all of our stuff apart and left it strewn all over the place and apologized and then took off. And there we were on the side of the road having to repack all of our stuff.
How long do you think they kept you in the questioning in the cars for?
Probably 20 minutes, eh? What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys were in a little bit longer than me.
Yeah.
I kind of made them suspicious because I didn't know that we'd already gone through Missoula.
Hmm.
And I didn't know we stopped at McDonald's. I just knew we stopped you'd stopped someplace. Later on that trip, we were up in Alberta. Remember, we were kind of looking for caribou way up in the high country, and we came across
Oh, yeah.
2 Alberta provincial police guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were camping up there too.
Hmm.
And we told them the story, and they said that the Montana State Troopers had done everything right.
Yeah.
They said exactly what you're supposed to do. I remember when I looked back, when I turned around, looked and saw all those guns pointed at me, way in the distance, there was more cop cars, and they had the whole highway blocked off.
Both directions.
Yeah, so nobody was getting near us. I don't know how many cars must have been involved total.
I don't know, but they're from all different jurisdictions. And we were afraid when we took off, when we finally took off again, we were thinking, wow, there's an all points bulletin out for us. When we get to the next county, we're going to go through all this again.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But we didn't, fortunately.
When I told other people this story, the first thing they said, you should sue them. No, really, everybody told me that I should sue them, but not the provincial police, the Alberta provincial police. They said that they did everything right. So
I was sitting in the cop car when Durf popped his head up, and I really thought they were going to shoot him. I was afraid because Durf was goofing off, he wasn't taking it seriously. And I thought, oh man. So I was telling the cop that's just our friend, don't shoot him. He was sleeping in the back. I think my cop, I think he believed me and he grasped what was happening and that they shouldn't get too crazy. But I remember talking to Durf afterwards when we were driving after we took off, and he was saying that he was thinking about trying to slip away.
yeah,
You were thinking about flight options.
I thought I should at least get in front of the truck because those guys were armed. There he is. Yeah,
Okay.
those guys were armed, and I wanted some protection.
Yeah.
I thought about jumping in front of the truck, then I said, wait a minute, it's probably better under the truck. However, that would have made him suspicious, I think.
It's funny that you say that though, because when we had that experience in Mexico with the police, which we called to help us, but when they showed up and they had their machine guns and everything, I went through the same thing. I was like, okay, where can I hide? Where can I run? What can I hit them with?
Yeah, I think it's called self-preservation.
Yeah. I didn't even think about it. Your mind just went there. So Dad, you didn't think that at all? You weren't like, how do I get out of this?
Oh no, I was just trying to reason with him. I was backing up and I was saying, hey, I don't know who you think we are, but we're not them. We're just on a backpacking trip.
What did you do right after they let you go?
Well, we were wide awake, I can tell you that. Yeah, we were just talking, we were just thinking, wow, what's going to happen in the next town?
So they told you, the cop in the car told you that there was an armed robbery at that restaurant at the McDonald's, or no?
No, I don't think in the car. I can't remember when they told us that.
Yeah, because I didn't know what was going on probably till I was out of the car.
They must have let us all out, right? And we must have all been back together, getting back into the van. And then they apologized to us. And I think that's when
I don't remember any apology.
No?
I was struck by the fact that they didn't apologize
Oh,
and just told us what had happened. They told us why we were pulled over and et cetera. But boy, I thought we were doing apology.
No, I don't remember the apology either. I just remember they made a mess of the truck. We carefully packed everything, so when we got out of the truck the next morning, we were ready to go. And they kind of threw a monkey wrench in our plans for a bit.
I just remember a weak apology, but thinking that it sure wasn't much. And I think we drove for quite a while longer. And then I think that was the night we just pulled over. We went across these railroad tracks and we just camped there somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
We did not use a tent that night. We slept under the stars. I just got that new sleeping bag and it was like really, really thin. It was made out of some high-tech material or something. And your two bags lofted up, man, like 8-10 inches high. And mine was like 1.5 inches high. And I said, oh man. And I just bought that. I said, oh man, I got ripped off on this deal. But I was fine.
So on the way back then, home, did you have to go through the same town?
I doubt it. I'm sure we didn't come back the same way.
No, we went a more northern route back. I think we came back on Route 2 or something.
Oh, that's right.
We stopped at my brother's place in UP of Michigan.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh yeah.
We told them the whole story. They thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, that would have been when I got tangled up with the poison ivy. Remember? I broke out in poison ivy and
Oh,
I was
yeah.
gonna go to Tom's brother's house and he was gonna give me some kind of a shot to help it. But we stopped at a hot spring. We saw a hot spring on a map. So we navigated over that, went up, and you guys snuck me in because you said there's a sign that said you can't go in there if you have a rash. And I was covered with poison ivy. Yeah, I remember. Because the worst thing you can do once you've been exposed to poison ivy like that, we were at my brother's and I was staying away from it. And I started playing with his dog and his dog had been rolling in it. So like 3 days later, I got covered with it, but I couldn't take a shower because we weren't near a shower. We were in backcountry. And it just got worse and worse on the whole trip.
You're making me itch.
On the way back, we stopped at that hot spring before we got to Tom's house, and those guys put towels around me, so we kind of snuck in the side way. About 3 hours later, it was gone. The poison ivy was gone. I was just as clear as if I'd never seen it before.
Really?
Yeah.
You left it at the hot spring.
Oh,
Well, sleeping in a sleeping bag for what, 3 or 4 days before you get to take a shower, or 5 or 6 days, and the worst thing you can do.
Was that the one? It was like way off the beaten path, and well, Route 2 is pretty much off the beaten path, but then we had to go on a dirt road to the north off Route 2, and it was just way up in there somewhere.
Yeah, it was real strange. It was like they had a motel beside it.
The girl that we paid and let us in and all that, she didn't know that there was such a thing as New York State.
Yeah,
Remember that?
yeah, that's right.
She said, we told her we're from New York. And she said, well, New York City. And she's talking about the big city. No, we're from New York State. She said, well, I didn't know there's a New York State.
That's right.
so they didn't call your wives right away, right? Did you call them and tell them, or did you guys wait until you got home to tell them?
We didn't tell them, did we?
I didn't.
I don't think so.
I had to tell them just before I came down here to set up because I had to explain what I was doing.
No way. That would be really funny.
Tom's audio went scratchy here. He went on to say, no, of course not. I think we all waited until we got back.
Yeah, I think so.
We didn't have cell phones back then. When we were away for 2 weeks, we were away for 2 weeks.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So did you think that this was just a completely random one-off experience that would never happen again, or did it change the way you travel going forward?
Yeah, I don't think it did. I think we just thought it was a fluke.
Yeah.
Do you ever go into McDonald's and not think about this, or is it more unusual that you would think about it?
I never go into McDonald's.
Yeah. I avoid that place too. But when you got grandkids, we take them out to McDonald's probably once a year, maybe.
You don't avoid it for that reason, though, right? It's probably other reasons.
No, I just
No, because the food's terrible.
I do have empathy every time I
Scratchy again. Tom continues, every time I pass a car that's been pulled over by 2 or 3 cop cars by the side of the road,
yeah.
have a little empathy for those criminals now.
Yeah. The last question I'll ask you, what's one piece of advice you'd give somebody about traveling?
I would say travel light don't carry a gun. And yeah, avoid the police as much as you can. Don't look suspicious.
I would say the main thing is go with the right people.
There you go.
Yeah.
They can make a trip or they can destroy a trip.
Yeah, but there are times we gotta travel with your wife too, though.
Probably a good idea to go on a long trip before you get married. That's good advice.
Yeah,
I completely agree with that. It's so critical.
you've got a lot more miles on your belt at your age than we did, so we should be asking you for advice.
I don't know. Dad, what's your advice?
Well, yeah, I don't know. Boy, travel is different now than it used to be.
Mm.
When we traveled, our goal was to avoid the big cities and just stay in the rural areas where you could camp wherever you wanted to. But I think that's pretty hard to do nowadays.
This was really nice. It was also just really nice to talk to you all and see your faces after such a long time. I should let you guys go.
Okay, Lisa, thanks for talking to us. It's nice to catch up with you.
Well, thanks for bringing us together. That was a real nice idea.
Yeah, hey, Tom, next time, let us know when you're up this way. We'll probably try to get over there.
Good.
Take a canoe around or a bicycle or something.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Let's do a bicycle or a canoe or a bicycle and a canoe.
Okay, sounds
Okay.
good.
Get in shape.
Sure, right.
Buy a pair of bike shorts, Durf.
Yeah, instead of your blue jeans.
Oh, yeah.
Bye.
Bye, Lisa.
Bye, Lisa.
Happy solstice.
Tom, you're setting up this trip, so you're gonna be the trip leader.
Yeah, okay.
Plan the itinerary. Later, guys.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Bye, Lee.
Thanks for listening.
When's the last time you all have gotten together?
Geez, I don't remember.
That's a good, boy, you really stumped us on that one.
Last summer, wasn't it?
Lona just yelled up. It was before COVID.
No.
We had that bicycle tour last year. Remember we? Right?
Dirk and I have done a bunch of stuff, but Tom's been blowing us off.
No, didn't we?
We were all at Tom and Wendy's camp.
Yeah, we did that canoe trip. That's right. Last year, right? Last summer,
I don't know.
we paddled in Saranac Lake, Upper Saranac.
That's right.
We usually have an annual spring, end of winter get together up at the cabin. But I had to cancel that this year because we were helping out the neighbors and we didn't want anybody exposed to COVID. My elderly neighbors.
Yeah, I guess that probably was the last time that all of us were together was that canoe trip. Yeah.